It was car number 44 who crossed the finish line first at the 2021 Spanish Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton wins his third race of the 2021 season, and in his intense fight with Max Verstappen, he now leads 3 races to 1 and takes a sizable lead in the Drivers' Championship as well. Now let's talk a little bit about the race. Starting from pole, Max Verstappen was right beside him at P2 and managed to take the lead of the race going into the first corner. He really had his elbows out and managed to squeeze Lewis Hamilton to the corner of the road and took the race lead. After that, it was all about Lewis Hamilton and how he was closing and slowly biding his time to strike. Now, we've seen this before. For anyone of you who watched this race, this is a race that has happened before, at least strategy-wise. Hungary 2019. It was a similar situation where Verstappen was leading and Hamilton was trying to hunt him down, but because of perfect car positioning or because of circuit conditions not being adhesive for an overtake, he wasn't able to get through on the first attempt. And then the strategies came into play, and Mercedes called Lewis Hamilton in for a second pit stop, something that Red Bull were not anticipating and were caught off guard. That second pit stop gave Hamilton an extra set of tires, a fresh set of rubber to chase Max Verstappen down. 22 seconds was the gap rather between Hamilton and Verstappen when Hamilton came out of the pits after his second round of pit stops, and within 12 laps he was in striking distance, and it was a relatively easier pass for him to overtake Max Verstappen on fresher rubber, because Verstappen had been on his set of medium tires for quite a while by that point in time, and it was during the last 10 laps of the race, and he had put those tires on somewhere around the 25th lap, so he'd already used up the prime of that rubber in keeping Hamilton at bay during his first stint. So Hamilton swept around the outside again at turn number 1, similar to the way he took the lead of the Imola Grand Prix when he overtook Valtteri Bottas around the outside. And then there was no looking back. Then it became a cat and mouse game between Valtteri Bottas, Sergio Perez, and Max Verstappen for the fastest lap of the race. All three of them trading fastest laps, one after the other. At the end of it, Max Verstappen, on the freshest of rubbers, was able to pip the extra point for the fastest lap of the race. So quick recap of what happened in the race. Lewis Hamilton P1, Max Verstappen P2, Valtteri Bottas P3. The fifth time the three of them have got themselves to the podium in the Spanish Grand Prix for that matter. So just going again and again and again, keep seeing these three on top, and Valtteri Bottas is quite a few miles, I would say, behind the pair of these, but these two guys have just been putting performances after performances and have just been eking themselves out from the rest of the pack. Speaking of the rest of the pack, P4 went to Charles Leclerc, a very solid performance from the Monegasque, starting in P4, ending in P4. Scuderia Ferrari will no doubt will be very happy with his performances so far this season. He's been able to get the maximum out of that red Ferrari, and he's been putting them in places where no other driver for that matter could have managed to, because remember, the Ferrari is still not up to peak performance. It's still not there where it used to be. So mega effort by Charles Leclerc. Sergio Perez, a good recovery drive starting from P8 ending up in P5. I think Red Bull were hurt by not having that second car in the hunt when it came to the lead of the race, and that is what hurt Max Verstappen in not being able to cover Lewis Hamilton off from doing that second pit stop. So they could really use Sergio Perez fighting it out in the top three to help Max Verstappen with his championship battle with Lewis Hamilton. Yes, going down further down the order, Daniel Ricciardo, one of his best race weekends in orange in his new team McLaren. He finishes in P6, a solid performance from him as well. Carlos Sainz P7, Lando Norris P8, Esteban Ocon by the barest of margins holding on to P9, Pierre Gasly P10. Now, something very interesting happened in this race. at one point in time during the later half of the race, for vying for P10 were at least 5 to 6 cars. Fernando Alonso was the one who was in P10 at that point in time. There was George Russell behind him, there was Sebastian Vettel behind him, there was Lance Stroll behind him, there was Pierre Gasly behind him, and it all let loose during the last few laps. Eventually, Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, and Esteban Ocon managed to hold on to the last few points position. Lance Stroll eventually ending up in P11. Nothing much exciting from the rest of the race. Nikita Mazepin had a moment yet again, and he's living up to the nicknames that he's been given by the F1 community, so to speak. He has become the Mazepin for Formula One, if you will. Spain was relatively a very harder track to overtake on, and we're seeing this the more we go into this hybrid era without the regulation changes that are set to come in from 2022. We see that more and more tracks have become tracks where you cannot actually go wheel to wheel with other cars because of the track layout or because of the dirty air coming out of the car that you're trying to follow, which all the Formula One community is trying to figure out how to improve that aspect of racing come 2022. But for this season at least, if you're ahead, unless you have a massive tire advantage, you are more or less going to win the race. Next up, we go to Monaco, another track where it is extremely hard to overtake, but it is a street circuit, and Lewis Hamilton has a very good record at Monaco. So the Red Bull team and Max Verstappen will have to pull up their socks if they want to spring a surprise over the Silver Arrows. Until then, it's goodbye.